the greatest entrepreneurs, they have it together up here.
Is it possible to really, truly succeed in the business world without the toll being too big?
If you want to build an incredible life, master one relationship first.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Formidable Family Man Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. Today, my guest is Tom Telford. And man, we had a fun conversation today. Tom's moved to a small town where Rachel and I lived when we were first married, and that's where we adopted our oldest, and then our two sons. The next two sons were born in that community. It's where I trained for triathlons and spent a ton of time on my bike up there and snowboarding in those mountains. And he's right there, lives next door to a good friend of mine. So just had a fun conversation with all the things we have in common, and even his daughter and my son are in Madrid, Spain right now at the same time, and just a great conversation. But Tom he was working in the financial services industry and started and sold companies and organizations there, and then moved into the mental health sector. And he is the co-founder of Levo, which is a mind care company. He's also the co-host of Stoke podcast and the organization Stoke. And then his wife actually has a clinic where she does counseling and coaching. And we talk about his story and his own journey with his wife and their journey through making their own mental health and mental and emotional well-being and telling a story. I mean, he just shares some great insights for all of us about how we can cope with what happens in life, because there will always be stressors. There will always be struggles, gentlemen. And finding the best ways to cope with it is so important. And we talk through business, and we talk through how to start, run, and exit businesses and create wealth, and the toll that takes in life, because there is a toll and stress is a toll. But Tom points out that the toll booth cannot be our most important relationships. Anyways, lots of great nuggets in here. Just a fun conversation. Gentlemen, enjoy this episode. All right, Tom, welcome to the show, brother. Super excited to have a conversation with you today and learn from you. And it's fun. You know, so for the listeners, he and I have a lot in common. A lot of mutual friends, a lot of, well, you're in the playground where I played for years. You know, seeing your pictures and I'm like right there. I spent a lot of time right there in your backyard, and I miss it. Anyways, we're super excited to have you here on the show. And why don't you just give us your story, your background, and we'll just dive in from there.
Thanks, Greg. It is an honor to spend some time with you. And yes, I'm in the backyard of my dreams. So I feel fortunate to be where I'm at. In fact, we'll dive into this more, but I'm sitting in the spot that for the last, I'm 47 going on 48. So I'm just going to say, since the time I was roughly 8 years old, so the last 40 years, I dreamt about where I'm sitting right now, in the location, in the chair, out looking out the windows at what I'm going to call Snow Basin Ski Resort. I grew up ski racing. I was a ski bum. It was where my playground was. And so I feel fortunate to be in a spot recording right now with you in a place that I had dreamt about for 40 years. So this is cool. Thank you for the opportunity.
Cool. Yeah. And I love that whole story of taking a dream and just keep on chasing it until you make it a reality. There's so much power.
And I hope to dive into that very thing today with you and for listeners. When I record podcasts, I always think about an audience that I would love to reach. I'm just picturing who that is. And if I could choose that demographic, it would be something about, the 12-year-old, to, I'm going to call it a 30-year-old, male or female, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get what I want out of life, despite the challenges that I know that are in front of me. So with that context in mind, maybe I'll just start and share a little bit of my background. So I was raised in Kaysville by Gary and Jill Telford, some amazing people. My dad is a cowboy at heart. I grew up sitting on the fence at rodeos. He was a calf roper, a team roper. I was raised by a mother who's, the daughter of a farmer. And so between the cowboy and the farmer, I was taught very young work ethic, grit, and some grace along the way. So that is just part of my, upbringing of who I am. And yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of background in terms of just, my story growing up in Kaysville, Utah.
Love it. And how long have you been married? And tell us about your family and your kids real quick.
Um, I am married to Liza. We knew each other growing up. We were introduced by sisters when we were teenagers, and she's the love of my life. And we'll talk more about that relationship and why one amazing relationship makes all the difference in life. We have 3 children,
Yes,
Jackson,
it
who's
does.
23, Jackson, 23, Aspen, who's 20, who's about to wrap up an LDS mission in Spain in 3 months. And
Wait,
then
whoa,
James,
wait, what? Which mission is she in?
she is in the Madrid South.
Oh my goodness, my son is serving in Madrid North right now.
Oh, you're kidding.
That's so awesome.
Crazy. So he's in, northern Spain for the most
Yep.
part, which is
Yeah.
just,
He's just outside of Madrid right now and loving it.
yeah, ironically, I mean, that's actually where my daughter just was. So they may have even known each other, even though the missions are split. There is, there's one temple in Madrid and they all end up, on the temple block
Oh,
at
that's
some
so
point.
cool.
So,
How fun. Love
yeah.
that. Another
So,
connection.
yeah, wild, small world, man. And then James is our caboose, so to speak. He's 14. He's at Morgan High, which is your stomping grounds. And just loving it there. So yeah, that's our children.
I love it, man. Okay, so let's just dive into that. Let's start with the marriage thing. And you hit it right out of the gates. It's the most important relationship. And how did you come to that? You always believe that? You guys you've known each other for a super long time, but how is it you've created a marriage that's working and thriving and important?
We have known each other a long time. And what's interesting about that concept of, and I say this openly to people, I speak at graduating classes often, and I tell them, if you want to build an incredible life, master one relationship first. Start with one amazing relationship. And our relationship, even though we, were, relatively high school sweethearts, she dumped me a couple times. We wrote each other on and off, through missions. But there was something that happened during our mission year. I went on a mission to Minnesota. She was called to serve in Venezuela, but she came home after 8 weeks of being in the MTC. She got really sick and she was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety. And that was the beginning of this, what I'm going to call the river that runs through it, which is our mental health. And that mental health story, we did not necessarily know how that would play out during those years, but in our early 20s, we scaffolded, right, our own mental health story.
Yeah.
And even before we were married and engaged, mental health was a thing. And I say that now just to kind of set the stage that 20 years later, our lives are totally entrenched in mental health. We own 3 mental health companies together. So those early formidable years, to use the word formidable, it was rough. The beginning of the scaffolding of our life was rough. I mean, it started with a beautiful marriage. We were in love, but that relationship in those early years was tough, not because we didn't love each other, but because we brought to the marriage 2 people who were not perfect.
Right.
In fact, 2 people who were, relatively high functioning, but broken in our own way. And so in those early years, we had some tough stuff with anxiety, OCD, some mental health things. That first started with her challenges. But quickly as an entrepreneur, to this date, I've only been on a salary a total of 2 months in the last 25 years. I don't really know what a salary is like. So as I was in school, as I was going through my education and she was wrapping up hers, I was also an entrepreneur. I started right out of the gates, as an entrepreneur in the financial sector. And so between her challenges with, mental health, and then quickly, as I started as an entrepreneur, what I realized is that the greatest entrepreneurs, they have it together up here. Most people think entrepreneurship is about an incredible idea or this business strategy or marketing or all of those things. And it's true. You need to be very formidable about those things. But if you are not mentally strong, you are not going to do well in entrepreneurship. It is the muscle of entrepreneurship. So intellect, mental strength, resilience There's a number of buzz terms for it today. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you better scaffold the mind early and high, because you're going to need it. And so those early years of our marriage and our relationship, we faced some tough stuff. One side story, just to kind of frame it. We were about 9 months married, and we were living in Salt Lake, in close to the U, this really, run down apartment complex. We were on the second level. And one night I heard some noise, and it was on our balcony. Couldn't really figure out what was going. But as soon as I was awake and alert enough, I recognized someone was trying to break into our apartment. So about the time that I could get out of bed, about the time that I could pull a shotgun out of our closet, which we'll talk about guns and violence, maybe as we go through this, but I barely got the gun up in my hands, pointed it at the door, our bedroom door, and the door flew open. And I was standing eyeball to eyeball with an intruder with a shotgun like inches from his face. And so these tough moments of newlyweds, her mental health, me being an entrepreneur, both going to school, trying to work, and then we get broken in. And so that just kind of frames for listeners and people to know those were tough years. We faced some really tough stuff in our early marriage. And that became the recipe, though, for really scaffolding a strong marriage where two people rely and lean into each other versus being pulled apart. Exactly. And it took work. It took a lot of work. In fact, that time frame became really challenging in what are we now going to do? Who are we going to lean on? Are we going to run? Are we going to flight? Or are we going to fight? And there were moments where both of us wanted to take flight. We got to get out of here. I'm not safe in the marriage. What's going on? There was a point where I remember in my own mental health, probably the night or 2 nights after we were broken into, I had visited with my parents. I had visited with her parents. And I remember thinking, I'm not ready to be an adult. I don't know if I have the tools to be an adult, married, and do this. And I questioned my man card that night, my human card, just my adult card. Like, can I really do this? Am I capable of doing this? And there was a feeling that night of, I can protect her. I did, but who's got me? Right? And as much as I love her, that night, I did not necessarily feel safe from a physical danger perspective in that situation. And so it just really made me question who I was, what am I capable of, who do I rely on, who's got my back? And
fundamental questions for all of us. So powerful.
Yeah, some really tough stuff. And what I recognized was, regardless of what she brought in her brokenness, and regardless of what I brought in my brokenness, if I could just take a step back for a minute and think, do I love this woman? And the answer is, I would have died that night protecting her. Most people think they would. Most people, they dream about that, or daydream about what would happen if I was in a situation where I would have to protect the person I love the most. And what I told myself was that, yes, you would, and yes, you did. Now, luckily, I didn't have to pull a trigger that night. I think the outcome is significantly different if that happens. But not that we would have left the marriage and the relationship, but we were tested very young in the marriage of,
right,
would I do anything it takes to be with this person? And the answer is, to this day, I die over this woman. Beautiful. Everything that we have done and created, the why behind it, the how behind it, all of the, the questions have really brought me back to this one person that I die over, in this life. And so, yeah, man, I mean, that's who she is. That's who I am. I don't even question, what our relationship is like. And do I have, a partner, a friend, a lover? She's my person. She's my partner in life.
So, man, that's so powerful and so profound, because it becomes, it's the framework, it's the chassis, it's the foundation that everything else is built on. And in those early years, well, like all of us, we're all doing that. And then you bring some additional elements and it makes it even harder. You're just trying to figure out how to make it work. So if you answer the first question of like, do I truly love this woman? And am I willing to fight for this? If it's a yes, then man, you just get to work figuring it out. I want to ask, brother, if like now looking back on it, with the passing of the years, there's this added insight, this perspective, this wisdom that comes. So now looking back at it from where you are and everything you guys have learned, and what's super cool, I love these kind of stories because my story is similar. My passion, my drive really was solving my own original problem. And in a lot of ways for you guys too. Like you're in the mental health space now because you experienced it firsthand. But I want to ask, like, what are some things you guys did wrong that now, like looking back, if you had known then what you know now, what would you do differently?
We would have approached coping entirely different. So, and this is really key and central, and I hope people, catch on to this concept, because the things that we did wrong in the early years as entrepreneurs, as married people, is, the way that we dealt, right? Just how do you deal with life? We did it wrong in the way that we had our coping strategies for how we dealt with the stresses of life were, I believe this, that you're only going to be able to rely on the coping mechanisms that you have built. And if you don't build positive ones, you're going to revert to the negative. So, for example, I was raised in a family and I love my parents and I love my family. They gave me a foundation that is just incredible. But I think if you ask the same question to my parents, they would say, we did get some things wrong. And so what I believe that my wife and I got wrong in the early years is that she brought her way of coping and I brought mine, right? That's all you know. Well, what I brought to the marriage and coping was tough conversations create anger, frustration, and conflict in a marriage. And above all else, harmony is the most important thing, right? That's how I was taught from an LDS perspective.
Avoid the tough conversations so you can have harmony and peace.
Yeah, sweep it all under the rug. Don't talk about it. Hold it all inside. Well, what happens when you hold inside smoke or something that, it can combust? You blow up, right? And so the inability to communicate well and fight well, have good, productive conflict did not exist. The second thing is that because I am LDS and the way that I was raised with all of the, values, all the things, all good things, but I associated my self-worth and worthiness to, am I good at law of chastity? Am I good at word of wisdom? All those things, right? These standards. The problem with that is that when you're in a stressful time frame and your need to cope with things, you're going to pull from the areas that you still feel like you can maintain your worthiness and, right, your good standing with God. Well, what does that mean in LDS culture, right? I'm not going to drink a case of beer. I'm not going to smoke weed, but will I overeat every day, all day? Yes. And I did. And so what are the implications of not communicating well, fearful of conflict, and eating your feelings? And the challenges of that are not good, right? You are going to reap the fruits of that labor. Well, it's not productive. And so in those early years, what we did wrong is that we did not have great coping, right? We battled, each other at times because we were fighting each other because we were feeling internal conflict. Doubt.
That is huge. I guess I just want to stop for a second and really emphasize that. The fight that's happening with those in proximity is so often because of internal conflict.
Yeah, I mean, think about it as a parent. When your child comes home, right? If you're Jill Telford and your son Tommy, who has ADHD and is dyslexic, comes home from school, and he's been trying to stay in his chair and not have his teacher say Tommy 80 times a day, right? He's going to bring home this energy that he needs to get out. And what does he do? He's going to blow up on his safe person. So I'm sure my mom, for years and years, was like, she was my whipping post, right? Which is horrible. But if you bring that to a marriage, right? If you don't have a way to get stressors out, you're going to take it out on the people around you, right? So this is the dad who's screaming at his kids, and his kids are like, why does dad hate me? And dad's like, I don't hate you. I just need to put my anger and frustration somewhere that I can't do at work because it's not safe at work. If I yell at my wife, then that's abusive, right? And so this conflict that's going on inside a human has to come out. And so coping with stressors was not, it just took us years to flex those muscles. So what happened? This great blessing. We moved to Southern California when our oldest was a baby. And that whole experience in Southern California taught me hundreds of lessons, mentorship from the guy that I partnered with for a time there. But the best thing that we brought home from Southern California had nothing to do with business, had everything to do with that she and I committed to a lifestyle of running and getting outside and feeling sweat and sun and stoke, right? Which is Brain Stoke, which is a podcast and a company that I own. The 5 S's, right? Really, I learned those S's, which is serotonin. I learned to care for myself during that time frame in Southern California, and so did she. So we were not runners. We were, I was, I love cycling. I'm an athlete at heart. But during that time frame in Southern California, I dropped 40 pounds. I found myself again. She found running. It was just something we would do. We would put our son in the middle of a football field at a private school in his, in the stroller, and she and I would just run laps around. We did that several times a week. And so that time frame of learning to scaffold good coping, right? Just being active, exercising, our clean eating started during those years of just, can we eat better? Can we take care of ourselves? So coping has now evolved. We've added a number of other things to our marriage and our life, but positive coping was something that those early years we were forced to figure out because of just some of the conflicts that we had. My health, which I can talk a little bit more. I'm the health insurance industry's worst nightmare, right? They're not making money on me.
Same, brother.
We can talk, we can talk more about that, but, so just coping, right? Just
Huge.
do we have good coping and how do we, do it together and make it more of our lifestyle together? And, one other thing I would say that I think has been absolutely magic for us in our relationship, regardless of our financial situation and regardless of what was going on in our life with our children, we always found a way for she and I to get away without children once or twice a year, at least one time for a week with, in a sunny destination where we just soaked in, literally binge took in serotonin, sleep, sun, sweat, sex, which I am going to say, all of the serotonin things that you can have in your life to just refill the canteen and to re-fall in love. Liza would call it retelling your love story. We just did this again recently. This is so valuable to a relationship to truly invest in it, even when it doesn't make financial. I mean, there were years where some of those trips probably ended up on a credit card.
Sure, absolutely. Same in our story, brother.
But the investment, right, is now what? We've been married almost 26 years, and I would still die for this woman, right? And I know she feels the same. That's just who we are. We have each other's back. And, in a time where so many of our friends and people around us, where their marriages are going sour or south, they may not be ending the marriage, but, they're cohabitating, right? They're in the marriage out of duty, right? They're staying in it. It's getting better. Yeah. But ours, I feel like, is accelerating, right? We keep going to these summits. And the thing that allows us to see the next summit in the relationship is that we are investing in that time, right? That week away, or we just went to Fiji to celebrate our 25-year anniversary for 2 weeks. And what we covered, the ground we covered in our relationship in 2 weeks together without children, without any distraction, it was pretty remarkable.
So
So
powerful. Yeah. We do, Rachel and I do a honeymoon trip every year. And we have for years and years. Obviously, when there's little kids, that's it really hard, or if your wife's pregnant or nursing or something, that's tough. But as soon as it's possible, and sometimes before it's financially possible, we have to make those investments into the marriage, because you're absolutely right. It's just a week away with just the two of you, remembering that you're in love, a man and a woman in love, and recommitting to each other. It is magic and so
yeah,
powerful.
it is. And that's what we began with, right? So we were asked to teach recently, because of what she's involved in, we're involved in, we get asked to speak or teach often, which is funny because I should not be allowed to talk about mental health or relationships for that matter. But I can speak to the things that we've done wrong. And that's one thing, we've done right, is to be in situations to remind ourselves that before the dream house, before the companies we've built and sold, even before our children, it all came because we originally fell in love with a human that we wanted to build it all for. And so even as I sit in this house that I've dreamt about for the last 40 years, I would not be here today without her. And it was for us. And so anyway, I think that's a great reminder of just, flexing that memory muscle of what it was in the beginning, and I know people say they change, and I know that they do. And there's all sorts of different circumstances in marriages and why they fail or don't do well. But that's been one thing, that we've actively done together, is to lean into the memory muscle of why we started it in the beginning.
Yep. And get real strategic about what you're going to do to make things different. I keep thinking of one of my all-time favorite quotes. It's by a Greek philosopher named Archilochus. He says, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training." Right? It's like, that's where we operate. and your guys' move to California shifted your training. It shifted your habits and your practices. And it's that simple. It's that powerful. Right?
It's really good because, again, go back to coping. So what happens when the relationship has stress? How do the two of you cope? Does one bail and go to mom, their parents? Does one, spend time online, pornography? Does one go to the bar? Like, what is your coping when relationship stress comes? And so if you don't have a way to cope with relationship stress in a positive way, that could be, Liza's world now, she's a marriage therapist. So, if you don't have coping with, for your relationship stress in a positive way that brings you back together or that pushes you to lean into each other, it's not good. Right. And so those are, you fall to what your training is. And so if you have no relationship training other than what you saw growing up, almost nobody says that they saw their parents in a perfect relationship, right?
Exactly.
I mean, when people ask me, when young kids ask me, like, why do you say that the most important thing that you did as an entrepreneur is to fall in love, right? Why would I say that about business, that falling in love with someone is the most important thing? And there's a lot there, but the truth is that a really great marriage, an awesome marriage, takes every tool and skill that you're going to need to be a great business owner. And at the core of it is impeccable communication and the ability to fight productively.
Exactly.
Right? When I go to business meetings, when I sit in a board meeting, if you go to boards and it's harmony and everybody just wants to leave happy, they get along, I'll show you an organization that's going nowhere.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
But if you go to a board meeting where they're just like at each other's throat and they productively have conflict, they're going somewhere. They have high expectations. Well, Liza and I in our marriage, if people thought, well, a great marriage looks like love and you're always hugging. No, we fight we just argued this morning over some stuff. But it was an argument about betterment, it was holding each other accountable for a better and a higher standard of what we want.
Love it.
So
Yeah.
one of my closest buddies said something to me years ago. His name's Tyler Talbot. He was a Davis Dart as well. Tyler and I worked with each other for years. And one day we were talking with each other on a business trip. And I said to him, hey, I'm curious, how would you describe why your, marriage has worked? And he said something really interesting that day. I've never heard it described this way, but he just said, his wife's name's Diane. Di just does it for me. And that term of just does it for me, a lot of guys would say that and they would think it's about attraction or sexual or whatever. But what he was saying, I said, Ty, what does that mean to you? And he said, she makes me better. So when he says, does it for me, he's talking about reaching. She makes me reach and be a better version of me. And at the very core, that is my wife. I know that I am better. For me to flee that relationship would mean that I'm abandoning self-improvement.
Yes.
That's how I believe that relationship is. Right?
I
That
totally
she
agree.
is, and she says very little, by the way. She's not like preaching like, you better put your socks away. And like, it's not that betterment. It is just the way she lives and treats people. I want to be a better human. She doesn't have to say much. And I just desire to be better.
That's one of the greatest benefits in a marriage and a partnership is this ability to get that refinement and inspiration and motivation and drive to improve. Can I ask you, because I'm very curious and I know the listeners will be too, as you were building businesses, as you built and sold multiple businesses and this path of entrepreneurship, man, there's a lot there. There's so much there. During those years, how did you stay invested in her and the kids? Like what did you do? And there was probably some, I'm sure there was some mistakes there as well, but there were some good things too that you must have done. Like, how did you get through that space and keep priorities as priorities?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is going to get real and raw, right? But we're just going to go there. She and I actually went to dinner on Valentine's last weekend. And on our way back, we had this very blunt and honest and real conversation about this thing. And the topic was, really what was going on during those years. And there was a moment in time when I was traveling at the peak. And it was a moment, just to kind of frame it for people, there's moments in business where the market, your fit, and the demand both in a vacuum, right? That's a term to use. Like when there's a vacuum for what you do and your expertise and people are literally sucking you in, they want what you have, you go all in, right? To use the term shooting fish in a barrel, there was a moment in my career where it was shooting fish in a barrel. And I just knew every time I got on a plane, the dollar figure for every trip was insane. I mean, it was just like, is this real? Could this really be happening? At the peak of that, my children were in the, 11 to 12 years old and down. And there was a moment in that time frame where my daughter was getting baptized. And so I came in town, we had family, everyone, was showing up at this baptism. And I remember standing there in the baptismal clothing with my daughter, having pictures taken with her. And then I remember walking down in the baptismal font, right? Getting ready to baptize her, immerse her in the water in that moment. And I remember having this thought to myself of, am I present? Am I here and present in my own mind and in this experience for her? And I started speaking the baptismal prayer and I said it wrong, right? Which is, you got to say it right? It's got to be the right words perfectly. And I said it wrong. And my dad, bless him, said, as he was standing there as a witness, he said, Tom, this is, and he corrected it. Like, this is what you need to say. And then I said it. We went on, no big deal. But years later, looking back on that moment, I recognized that I was not present in my own life. Even at that experience with my daughter, I was not fully present. Now, I love her. I don't think that she felt it any differently. It wasn't about me anyway, but it was a moment in time of me recognizing every entrepreneur pays a toll, right? It'll be interesting when I die if somehow, some way, at some point, someone says, hey, those years of entrepreneurship, they took X amount of years out of your life, by the way, right?
Yeah.
So entrepreneurship by at its very core is stress. There's so much stress. Well, if you study stress, and by the way, yesterday I did a podcast, with a guy by the name of Dr. Corey Rich. And Dr. Corey Rich, I heard speak at a conference last year. And in that conference, he showed a Harvard study that said at a minimum, 90% of every sickness and disease that people are treated for, think of that, 90% is directly correlated to stress. And then he said, further research has shown that it's 95%, right? So I just want people to hear this. Would I go back and change being an entrepreneur? Absolutely not. But if you don't think it's going to take, right, something out of you and out of the relationships, you have to pay the toll. And if people in relationships become the toll booth, that's a problem.
Yep.
Because
right
at
there.
some point,
that hits.
At some point, you're going to have this internal conflict where you wake up one day and you go, wait, in the very beginning, I started the businesses because I wanted to love and take care of my people. And now the business is actually pulling deposits out of those people. It's hurting those people. So yeah, it was hard. It was freaking hard, Greg. I mean, it was incredibly challenging, during those years. And there was a lot of stressors on both our family and relationships and me. We did a lot of things right. We still took those trips. We still had weekly date nights. We tried to be present. I tried to coach my kids' teams. I tried not to miss games. But by me, flying home at crazy hours in the night so that I could be home and coach my son's baseball game, I would be wrong if I didn't say that my physical health, got hurt
Right.
as a result of it. So when I joke about just at some point, right, again, the stressors, you will break down. So today, if I look back, I have had 4 knee surgeries, a shoulder surgery, a back surgery. The back surgery, I know the back surgery is directly correlated to ski racing and all the things, but walking through airports and sleeping on a different kind of bed 100 nights a year, it had its implications for sure on,
along with the
my
stress.
back. Yep. I have had Epstein-Barr virus. I have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I have had the swine flu, right? Like, it takes its toll. And so when I see people online, entrepreneurs showing their Lamborghinis and helicopters and, start a business and you can be a billionaire, whatever. I mean, you can have a great lifestyle, but there is a toll to be paid. And if you don't have the right positive coping skills in your life, entrepreneurship will crush you. I'm just going to say it again.
Yep.
You will pay a toll booth that it's probable you can't come back from unless you have the right coping. So I'll talk about BrainStoke in a minute and why BrainStoke is so critical, as an organization, because it teaches positive coping. But those entrepreneurship years were an incredible opportunity. They were incredible. I learned so much. Our lifestyle, our lives that we have today are directly correlated to the business
years
that we built and the partner. To be frank, I mean, I've had an incredible opportunity to ride the coattails of 20 or 30 amazing mentors, including my business partners in that last company that I sold, Rich Brock and Chris Burns-Fazzi, a man and a woman who are just the most giving and generous humans that I've ever known. And they also happen to be the most dynamic entrepreneurs I've ever met and been able to partner with. So the combination of those two things has allowed me to be where I am today. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Let me ask a hard question. A lot of the listeners are entrepreneurs and businessmen who've had a lot of success. Some of them are still right in the middle of it or kind of starting that journey. Is it possible, again, looking back on your life, I'm guarantee there's some things you do differently. Probably, I'm sure there's some things you are doing differently in the businesses you currently have. Is there a way to minimize the stress or the strain to keep your family, your relationships, your health from being the toll booth? Is it possible to really, truly succeed in the business world without the toll being too big, without the toll being irreparable?
Absolutely. It is. But to your point, right, you're going to rely on the training and the knowledge and the capabilities that you have built to be able to do it. And so when you're building a business, and if you do it right, by the way, you're going to burn the boats, which means you're all in. There is no going back, right? And so when you're all in, that means you're all in, like that you as the human are all in. And so if you're all in, how do you serve the family master, the children master, the church master, right? It's very challenging because you're pulled a number of different ways. This morning, I sat and ate breakfast with my wife, and she said, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm being pulled 100 different directions by horses," right? Just think of that thought. Like that's how it is. Now, it's stressful and you're being pulled a lot of different directions, but Greg, this is a key thing that I want people to hear, but this is who I am, right? It is who I am. So I was not built to go to an 8 to 5 job, and bless everybody who does, right? If I could turn off my mind and go do 8 to 5 and then leave work at work and come home and have dinner and play with the family, like that sounds amazing to me. Like when people are like, "Oh, I've been binging this show on Netflix." I'm like, "What? I don't,
I mean, how do you have
that's
time for
awesome,
that?
but I don't." No, I mean, it's not that I can't stay up late, but I go to bed at 9 because I'm already in tomorrow's to-do list, right? And so entrepreneurship at its very core is an obsession. You are
I
obsessively
gotta,
compelled to build and grow and do stuff. I mean, right now, we own 2 companies. We're launching one right now, but, and I have to say this just, so that people hear it, like the obsession. In the back of my mind, I have a unicorn that I've been building for years. And someday I'm going to launch it. I'm working on it a little bit, but it's a unicorn, right? That's just who I am. And so sometimes people hear entrepreneurs talk about it. And when they're talking about the stress of it or how hard it is, for a lot of people, I'm sure they're going like, just stop then. Like, just stop doing it. Like, do something different. That would be like saying to someone, go be somebody different than you are today.
and you are,
I mean, it's at my very core, my character is entrepreneurship. Like it's just who I am. And so I don't know, that's rambling, somewhat, but
and I like it. And
yeah,
I
I
want to
mean,
ask you, if you're happy with that, if you're fulfilled with that, if that gives you meaning and purpose, and like even right now, after all of your successes, if you wake up and want the pressure, you get up and like I like to say to my clients, I'm like, "Hey fellas, like we eat pressure for breakfast and a little extra for dessert," right? There's something to that. Do you feel like it, like you found a spot where that feels just fantastic and you're thriving in that?
Does it feel fantastic, right?
Well,
So
okay,
let's talk about
answer that.
let's talk about that very thing, right? Like there's a buzzword today, like going on out there, and I'm going to be on, a few more podcasts that I've been asked to talk about resilience, right? So what does it mean to become resilient? How do you become capable of just taking bullets all the time? And the answer is, then you get in the arena and get shot at all the time.
Yep.
Right. And so how do you scaffold resilience? How do you flex the resilience? And the answer is you live in stress. You live with frustration. So at my absolute best, when I'm at my best and just in the flow state, I am solving problems.
That was
I
exactly
am
what I was thinking.
trying to overcome any problem. So today, and I'll just say this, but I won't name the company. One of the companies that I'm involved with is I've been at it for 3 years, right? We're now beyond 3 years and I haven't made a dime. I don't take a salary. I've made no money,
Working
but
for
I'm
free.
so committed. I am so committed to solving those problems because if we do, and we have, I just don't take income from it. But when you solve something that is so deeply meaningful, that is crushing families, like of all the problems to solve, if you could figure out a way where families have better tools, you called it training, but if families just got better
Yeah.
and individuals got better in their mental health, I don't know that there's a better cause, right, that I could spend my time on. So you have to, I hope some entrepreneurs, some business owners hear that. Like, I believe I was called to be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
I
Same.
believe it's a calling. It literally is, I've read a couple or been on or heard a couple of podcasts recently. Casey Baugh, who has a podcast called Case Studies. Casey Baugh speaks about this with some of his audience, a lot of his audience, about business is a spiritual journey, right? So when I think about, spirituality, part of my spirituality is, what are my callings? What was I called to be a disciple of? And I feel more spirit in my life in business meetings and meeting people in business who are trying to solve truly, not because they want to be billionaires, but because they want to solve human problems. And if they do, the outcomes for humanity are significant. That's
Yeah.
incredible. What a gift to humanity to solve some of these things. So yeah, man, to me, it's a calling. It feels more like a cause at times for some of these institutions. This unicorn that's been, building in the back of my head for a long time, if I can solve that somehow, the implications of it are significant. And not just for my little small piece of the world. It is, wow, people who can connect in an entirely different way that is going to help build their scaffolding, in their life. I mean, that fires me up,
I
I mean,
love it.
would I deal with that stress? Would I take those bullets all day? The purpose of that is worth all of the, the breakdown in physical health. So yeah, anyway,
Love it,
that's
brother.
hopefully gives you a
Well,
flavor.
yeah, absolutely. Because there's so much meaning and so much purpose and a commitment to a cause that's bigger than ourselves, bigger than money. It's solving problems and helping people. Man, I love that. And
Yeah.
that's
And
where
I
I'm at.
feel
That's what I live
called to
for.
do it because when you sit on a podcast with a cool guy and you're looking out your windows at the view that you've dreamt about, right? It forces you to think about something, which I can share with you another quick story, but it forces you to really think through, how did I get here? Right. And the answer is nobody is self-made, right? I believe that to my core, nobody is self-made. And so if you think through that, if nobody is self-made and I'm here because of incredible mentors and people who helped me get here, then what? The answer is then I want to give back. I
Yeah.
want to lift other people like I've been lifted. And what's amazing about that from a mental health perspective, right? The fourth S and the five S's of brain stoke is serve. When you serve other people, there is literally oxytocin going on in your brain. And oxytocin is this incredible happy chemical that when you're helping somebody else in their life, the brain is rewarding you. I call it, God's meds. One of God's meds is oxytocin. And so giving back and lifting other people, there is a high to that it's one of the highs as humans that we get to experience. So yeah, I mean, I just feel stoked about my life, but I can't be stoked about it without giving some thought to how did I get it? And if
That's
I
it.
think, well, I got it through other people, then it's right? This is a leadership, concept. But if your leadership is driven by a belief of stewardship, I've been successful, so I have a stewardship to do something, right? To give back and to help other people like I've been helped. That's so key.
Absolutely. That's why I love to call that, at least for myself, it's a moral obligation, because we've been helped and blessed, and other people have stepped in when we needed it most, and somebody's given us advice or mentorship or guidance. And so the moral obligation comes with that to pay it forward, as they say, or to pass it along and be there for other people to make a difference in their lives. 100%, brother.
Yeah. And by the way, Greg, it's interesting. I've thought about this for some time now about flow state. What are you doing and what are the circumstances when you get into a flow state? And for people that may hear that term, study flow state. Just dive into flow state and what it is. But one of my definitions of flow state is that I can lose track of time when I'm in it. I don't even think about time. It happens. One of the ways that I get into flow state is having these mentorship and conversations like this, where we are talking and sharing real world knowledge, experience, and personal truths with each other. And when two people are speaking their personal truths to each other and they're learning and growing from each other, that causes something to occur, right? And there's a reason why they say that the opposite of addiction is connection. And it's interesting to kind of study that. But the reason that the opposite of addiction is connection is because when you connect with other people, there is chemicals going on in the minds of the two people. And those chemicals are binding people together. And so when you are connected with somebody and you have that chemical of connection going on between the two of you, you're not seeking outward and external coping.
Right.
You don't need drugs and alcohol, because your brain is getting those happy chemicals through people, through connection to self, right? I mean, I guys often will joke with me, my wife will say that, how can you go ride your bike for 5 hours alone? Like, who do you even talk to? But when I am out there and I'm connected to nature, or if I'm just letting my thoughts wander, there is an intimacy with self that is incredible. That some people will never understand, because one, they won't put themselves in nature and go do that. Or two, they believe that someone else has to be involved in a discussion or the, FOMO, whatever it is. Like, they just constantly rely on external or somebody else to reinforce how they feel connected. But I can go spend hours by myself and feel deep connection, right? To self, to the divine. There's so much there. And so, yeah, these chemicals that we've been blessed to have in our mind, Brain Stoke, we call it the daily dose, DOSE. Get your daily dose. Dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. If you can figure out a way to have daily dose in your life through these activities, things just change. I mean, your capability as a human is off the charts.
Well, because you're in line and you're allowing your body to do what it does, and you're clearing the rubble from your runway so you can get going and really move forward and make progress. I want to emphasize something you're saying there with relationships. First, a healthy relationship with yourself, like you're talking about, and then those close relationships with the people right in your life. If we don't figure out how to have those rock solid relationships, everything else is so much more difficult. And there's so many problems that come in life simply because those relationships are not in a solid place, which you've articulated so well today. And man, that has to be a priority.
It does. And I think that some people, actually LDS families, our LDS culture is that family comes first. And that's a beautiful thing. It's an incredible concept. But part of the challenges in the world today is that, LDS people can get married very young. They immediately start having children, and the children become the focus, which is great. That's not a bad thing. But there's a lot of unhappy adults in our culture because they don't have a relationship with self. And I'm not saying, just ignore your children and, don't take the responsibility that you should have to, to help and parent and be their guide. But there are a lot of people who are struggling because they don't have a connection to self. They don't get some self time in their lives. And at some point, every human is going to hold in contempt, or they're going to hold a grudge against others who have not allowed them to be connected to self, right? Who wants to live in the skin of self when they don't enjoy or, have a relationship with yourself? And so, yeah, I'm not saying it needs to be hours on end, but the ability to have a little bit of me time in life is so positive and good.
Yep. So good. I love that. Okay. Let's this has been so good, Tom. I appreciate you so much, man. Let's kind of wrap up with some daily or weekly practices that you're living right now in your 40s as an entrepreneur with multiple businesses, wife and children. Like, what are you doing that people listening say, hey, I can try that. I can do that. I can try to implement that. I'll give, see if it works for me as well. What are some things that you just know rock solid, you can lean on that through the stressors, through the chaos, through whatever, is happening? What can you lean on?
Yeah.
What do you lean on?
I'm going to give you one thing. I could give you plenty, but I'll just give you one core thing. Since I was 21, when I was 21 years old, literally day 2 after my mission, I served an LDS mission in Minnesota. I came home. And what I learned from that experience was, if you have a plan, it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to accomplish everything, but you're going to feel really good about progress. And so day 2 after my mission, I wrote a life plan. I literally wrote in a journal, this is what I want to do at 25, 30, 35, 40. And when I was literally 21, and I wrote a plan that said, this is how my 21-year-old brain worked. I think it's possible that in double my lifetime, so at age 42, I am going to be retired. So that seemed reasonable, right? Like, hey, I'm 21. If I just double my life, like, I can be done. And what I meant by that was, I don't want the pressure of having to work the same. But I wrote it in and I started working towards a plan. And I believed in it. I thought about it annually. I set goals. I'm a goal setter. And so I'm not going to necessarily dive into how my process, is for goal setting, but there was a practice that I embraced, and it's been a habit since I was 21 years old. And that is that every Sunday night, I sit down for 10, 20 minutes, and I have a journal or a planner. Today, I'm really I've worked, through this plan. I'll just share this right now, on here, the Full Focus Planner. And the Full Focus Planner it's my system and process for how I manage me, how I manage my time, my days, my goals. It's my process. And so every Sunday night, I dive into that and I make sure that what is going on in the week, the 5-6 days in front of me, that they're planned. And I know that 3 things are going to occur. 1, I'm going to feed my pocketbook, right? So I need to make a little bit of money. The second thing, I'm going to need to feed the relationships that I value the most. And third, I'm going to feed my physical, spiritual, right, capabilities. And so if people followed me around in a day, they would think that I've got some sort of obsession with this book, because I'm dedicated and I'm committed to it. And the reason that I am is because the output of that, years and years of doing it, is that I don't have perfect years by any stretch, but I rarely have a year where I didn't, quote, win the year. It just, the outcomes of having those habits and behaviors in place have been significant, to the point, Greg, where when I wrote that plan at 21 to retire at 42, in 2015, I was 38. And that changed my life. When I sold that company, it changed everything. Now today, I I'm still investing in building and starting companies and doing these things, but I don't have to because I need to survive and put food on the table. I do it because I have a deeper purpose. But all of the same habits and behaviors that I've been doing for, or did, for at that point, that was year 17, into the process. I'm still using it today. And so because I set an intention and I wrote it down and I worked towards it, and I set monthly and annual goals and then backed into the daily behaviors and habits that I needed to have every week to align with the monthly, quarterly, and annual goals that drove the 42-year-old goal. It all supported itself. And ironically, it worked, and what's bizarre as you look back is that you never know how it's going to scaffold or build. You don't know what the tree's going to look like. Right. You just know that if you water it every day, you make sure that you're watering it every day, it is going to grow into something. And what I can tell you is that days and weeks and months and years of watering a tree, it's going to shock you how big and beautiful that tree is. It just will be. And so when I think about just a life of accomplishment and progress, it really goes back to these habits. So I'm glad you asked the question, what have you done? What are the practices that you do that you rely on? This, start on a Sunday night and have a plan, and some days, there's nothing on the day that I wrote in there or whatever, but it's rare. Right. It's pretty often that, this morning I woke up at 5 and I was on my spin bike for an hour and a half. And when I look back, at the end of the spin today, this week, I have ridden 7 hours, right? So I didn't sit down and try to ride one time 7 hours, right? It's been each day, right? And so sometimes entrepreneurs or people, they want to go like, well, if I just go all in right now really fast, that it'll turn out to something. And the problem is, right, to go back to how we started, if you're that really obsessive person who thinks that you can build a company overnight, you're going to work really hard and it's going to be stressful. And likely what's going to happen is you're going to wake up really tired the next day and the company's not built yet. So you need to scaffold it over time. You need to water the tree and make sure the roots are growing and expanding, as you want to build this and grow this massive tree. So slow down, do it right, be consistent, but have a plan.
Work the plan.
Yes. And work the plan. Like wherever you're aiming is where you're going to go. And so if you never aim, you're just going to be scattered, right? And I think that, to be frank, I think that part of the problem today is that a lot of people are scrolling on social media. They see a big life. They see entrepreneurs who have killed it, and they really want that. They have a good vision for what they want out of life, but they don't know how to start, right? They want the great idea that's going to get them there, but ideas are fleeting. You have to build you, right? And I fully believe this, that there are no amazing companies out there. There are amazing humans with lots of habits and behavior that just applied who they are to the business and it built something crazy, right? Yeah. Behind every amazing company that is out there is incredible people. Very sharp people with incredible habits and behaviors who just figured out this process and a system for how to build something amazing. But it's people. I believe that. Even though today people would say, well, AI is going to take over. AI is not taking over. I don't believe that. I think it's going to be an incredible tool, but it is a tool for humans, right? Humans aren't going away. It's just another tool to accelerate what's possible. So it's all people driven. We're the people. So if you want to build something amazing, you better scaffold yourself, build the habits and behaviors every day.
Exactly. And the people are going to be the advantage. And being that caliber of person is going to be the advantage. Because if you stay small, you don't build the scaffolding and you try to compete with AI, you're going to get smoked.
Amen. That's exactly right.
I love it. Tom, so many great insights, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your plan. That is solid. I love that. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
How can people connect with you, learn about your businesses, your resources, get into the 5S's and the dose? Where
Yeah.
can we send all these listeners?
Yeah. So a couple things. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tom Telford on LinkedIn. The three companies. So Brainstoke is an organization, it's a mental health media company. So Brainstoke has a podcast. We have, cyclists who, we sponsor, ambassadors, that we're involved in. We do collaboration with two or three companies. I don't know if you've heard of Envy before. Envy's, a carbon fiber company that's based in Ogden. So Envy is a partner of ours. Cornerstone Advisors, which is a Gardner Brown, who's an incredible financial advisor, all supportive of Brainstoke and what it's trying, to accomplish. So brainstoke.com, is the website for Brainstoke. We're on social media, all of those platforms. Levo, a mind care company. Levo, if I'm a Utahn and I need mental health care, Levo is a great place to start because it employs professionals who have the ability to assess, diagnose, and put you in a treatment plan of some kind. It doesn't mean medication necessarily, but it is looking at the body to assess what's going on to then come up with a mental health plan.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. So Levo, a mind care company, is the other company. And then the third one is my wife's therapy practice, Us Therapy Group, is where people, can get therapy. So between those three organizations, we're pretty busy in the mental health space today of trying to help other people.
I love it. And it's such an important work. And man, just thank you so much for leaning into the healthy part of it. Like, is get the body and the brain doing the right things. And it makes the
we
battle
see
so
every
much
day.
easier.
My wife sees every day at Us Therapy Group, and I see at Levo every day. People are at their worst spot, right? They're in a bad way. If they come to those two organizations, something's off. What Brainstoke does is Brainstoke says, don't let yourself get there. There are certain circumstances. If you're a child of an abused parent, that's out of your control. Right? There's distress and eustress. And distress are things that you can't control that is, hurting you. And that's what Levo and Us Therapy Group are doing for people who are in distress. But eustress, which is chosen stressors, that's where we stay healthy and well. So Brainstoke is trying to get people to proactively sleep, sun, sweat, get your exercise, serve other people, and do things that you're stoked about. This stokes me, to spend time with you. When people have the 5S's in their life, it doesn't mean that they're not subject to challenges. It just means your ability to cope is better, right? This morning, I spent an hour and a half on my spin bike. No matter what happened after that, today, I've won the day. It doesn't mean like I'm going to become a billionaire today. It just means that whatever hits me, whatever bullets I'm going to take today, I'm capable because I spent an hour and a half of letting my brain fill all the chemicals of desire, accomplishment, the ability to be motivated, all of these feelings that we have, conquering feelings, being formidable feelings, those come to us when we are proactively leaning into, those behaviors. So thanks for letting me come on, Greg.
No, awesome, man. It's just so cool because you address your mind, body, and spirit first thing in the morning. You're ready to go, primed to win the day.
Yep,
and you stack those days in the win the year. I love it, brother.
Right.
Fantastic,
That's right.
sir. Tom, thank you so much, man. Sure appreciate you being here and sharing your insights and everything you're doing, man, to try to solve problems and help people. I love it, brother. Appreciate you.
So grateful, Greg, for the opportunity, truly. I mean, of all the things that I could spend time doing now, it is this, trying to share, some of the blessings and, opportunities I've had with others. So thanks for the platform. Appreciate it.
Love it, brother.